So I know a lot of you guys enjoyed my bizarre hallucinations on MDMA video, where I discussed some of the utterly mind-bending things that I saw on higher doses of the drug, which, if you don't know, higher doses of MDMA eventually convert into MDA in the body, which is responsible for the hallucinogenic effect. Obviously, me as a amped up drug-fueled teenager at the time had no idea what was going on, and I just thought, oh, you just take loads of MD and you start seeing people juggling bowling pins in the street and prostitutes offering you fags on your walk home. But nah, it's because it converts into MDA, which is pretty fascinating when you think about it. You've got to take a lot as well. But anyway, getting sidetracked. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the bizarre and strange experiences I've had on high doses of Ket, or just Ket and other dissociative like drugs in general. Because I reckon, I'd say for me, along with MD and Ket and acid, they're like the three main substances I've used over the years that I've had the wackiest, like most mystical, dreamlike experiences on. Obviously I had mental experiences on other chemicals, but these are the three most common, and I've got a lot of stories to share regarding them. So I thought today I'd go through the chronological order of my weird and wonderful experiences on Ket that have twisted my mind in regards to the way I perceive the drug, which is something that I used to just have like at raves or festivals or just an occasional session, and it just make you feel a bit floaty and a bit numb, and I just enjoyed it as a nice little relaxant, or in some cases a stimulant as well, because it can act as a stimulant for some people, myself included. I mean, stimulants for me, like, I don't really like take drugs massively anymore, but obviously I will do if I'm going to an event or a festival or something, because why not? It's a lot of good fun, and it's extremely sustainable in my sort of life. I'm not a very addictive person, but this doesn't mean I should advocate you using it at all. I don't think you should do in the first place. Don't follow in my footsteps. I'm a bad example. But yeah, so when I was first using Ket, it was just really light and fluffy, I guess. And the more I started using it, I started going a bit deeper into the depths. It started to get weirder and weirder, and probably the first time when I was like, whoa, this drug is actually pretty fucking warped, was I went to Leeds Festival 2016, which was one of the last good Leeds festivals. If you're here in the UK, you might agree with me in the fact that Leeds has become this commercialised, pop-driven machine, and I'm not interested anymore. But back then it was Red Hot Chili Peppers were headlining, which was pretty cool. Cage Elephant were there, Wiley was there when he was good. But yeah, so that was when I first started taking Ket at a festival properly, because I'd done it the year before at Kendal Calling 2015. That's a story I'm going to tell you about at a future date, one of the most fucked up experiences of my entire life, but I'm not ready to share that right now, because you need to consume that in a full video, because that is some wacky story. So yeah, I look forward to that one at some point. But yeah, I was proper smashing Ket at Leeds 2016, and it was the first time I sort of like K-holed. I was on the verge of it, not quite a K-hole, but I was like, oh, this is pretty strange, like everything's just warping around me and I can't focus my vision, and I'm falling into the ground in a sense. But it wasn't a full K-hole, it was like, yeah, it was on the verge of one. But then what the weird thing involving Ket was at that festival was that basically we ended up we ran out of all the normal Ket and had to settle on this like rock. It was like Ket in rocks, and it was sort of a bit like mustardy looking in colour, almost a bit like MD, but obviously it wasn't crystals, it was these like little rocks, and we ended up calling it Dino Ket to differentiate from normal Ket, just because it looked like prehistoric fossils, and it was even more expensive. It was like 40 quid a gram, so we got loads of that, and we're like, oh right, yeah, we'll just bosh it. So we had like lines that we would have been doing of normal Ket, and then we had it, and it just literally put us all into like the most horrible, disgusting, dissociative feeling, almost like high doses of MXE. Before you go into KO, it can feel like absolutely grim, People were like being sick left, right, and centre. A lot of the girls, like, because girls can be quite sensitive to drugs, and a lot of girls I know are actually sick on Ket. All these girls had like these normal size lines you'd have for normal Ket, and they were chundering the guts up. Some people were like speaking in tongues and that. My mate was like, "Oh, I'm fucking folding into an envelope," and he had to sit in a tent like for the entire day. So that was horrible, but obviously it was the only thing we could consume, so we just kept like shoveling it up. And it got even worse later on when this is weird, I don't even know how this worked. Perhaps it did. I don't know if it was just the fact that this cat was whacked up, but I ended up putting an acid tab and, unbeknownst to me, a tab of 25i in my baggie of cat just to keep it there, thinking, oh, I'll just put it in here because I've not got another baggie to store it in. And the bag got slightly wet, and what I can only assume is what happened was that the cat absorbed some of the 25i and acid, and then a few of us had the lines of it in the tent, and we ended up actually like tripping off as if we were tripping off like a tryptamine. It was fucking mad, mate. And then we were stuck all day like, oh wow, this is it, we've actually just fucking sniffed like ketty acid. And we were up for like 24 hours, couldn't sleep at all. The conditions at Leeds were absolutely disgusting that year. It was torrential. So we had to force ourselves to wade around in the mud. We were falling over everywhere. It was an absolute chaotic fucking nightmare, really. And it absolutely destroyed us when we got home a few days later, because this festival Leeds is like, we went for the 5 days, so you can imagine how devastated our bodies and souls were at the end of it. And I got home and I must have slept for like 24 hours almost to make up for the lack of sleep that the ketty acid had imbued us with, which is not nice. So that's become a legendary little folk tale amongst the people in my local community, because it was just such a traumatic event, and we always say, oh, I remember Dino Ket, that was some ruthless shit. But then after that, I guess never did Dino Ket ever again, and I just went on my ketty adventures. I had a mate who was I still mates with him now, and he became an actual Ket addict, like genuinely was on the verge of almost losing his bladder for years and years and years. He was smashing it like almost on the daily, having massive like iPad size lines with hefty like ridges and peaks in the fucking line. So it wasn't just some little thin line, it was a fucking like Grand Canyon sized one. So he was absolutely destroying himself, and like we were trying to get him all off it, and then it just wasn't working, and then we were getting ketty on the side as well. But then a few years later, Ket started to take a weird turn. We started to take Ket on psychedelics, and I remember I was on the verge of like an ego death at my own house. I remember it was when Red Dead 2 came out, and I had a little party, and we were fucking playing, someone was playing it, I was watching it because I was just too far spaced out to even figure out how to play it. And then I had some Ket, and it just like synergized with the acid so much that my brain just could not compute what was going on around me, and it was like my brain was assuming what was going on and filling in the blanks. So like someone was playing the Stone Roses off the speakers, and then an achievement came up in Red Dead 2, and it was like, you have unlocked the Stone Roses, and it had like an image of the lemon as the trophy. I was like, what the actual fuck's going on? My brain is like really filling in the gaps filling in the gaps, because my consciousness was fractured by the acid and the Ket. Well, actually my consciousness was elevated by the acid but fractured by the Ket, so I had this weird like mixture of confusion but also extreme understanding of like reality and life and what was going on. And then I had the weird sort of like Truman Show effect of everyone looking at me like, oh, you've done it, Johnny, you've broken out of the Matrix and all this shit. It was so fucking weird. And I was just looking at Red Dead, and people were like, every time I look at someone, they'd be in the screen, the fucking like carriages and the horses were spilling out into the front room, and I was like, oh my god, I'm fucking going off my head. Then my other mate was having a full-blown ego death, like almost speaking in tongues in the downstairs room. Oh, it was absolutely ridiculous. That was so weird, and that was like the trigger for the future, because a lot of the times after that, I'd have acid and ket, and that was it. That was me. That was gone. I was like basically on the verge of an ego death, or even like fully immersed in it. A trip report of my own is actually coming out soon, of the time I had an ego death on LSD at my girlfriend's house when she was having a party, and it was involved me basically laughing so much on ket and acid that I like laughed myself into enlightenment in a way, and I literally had like a fucking mystical experience of like angels and synesthesia and parallel selves that I'd inhabit and become, and then I'd look at objects, like I'd look at this fucking Judge Dredd figure, and then I'd become hyper aware that I can become Judge Dredd as like infinite consciousness. It was so fucking weird, and then he materialized in front of me. Oh man, it was so fucking weird. And yeah, ever since that first Ketty ego death with Red Dead 2, everything sort of just changed, and every time now I've had ket on a high dose, it's not like, whoa, I'm proper numb and KO me. It's like, holy fuck, my brain like rewires itself, and I have like a psychedelic awakening in some way. What happened? Oh yeah, Boomtown 2018, a few months after the Red Dead 2 incident, I had some ket, and I literally was like, again, everything was just like molding into each other, and people's faces were like merging. I couldn't make out my mate's face, so it like my brain just constructed what he thought was my mate's face with like aspects of my consciousness, so we ended up looking like fucking video game character. And I was also on 2CB at that time as well, so that was throwing me into the fucking deep end on top of that, and I just kept going like, I need to find my mate Joe, over and over again, and people are like, oh, he's just chatting shit. But basically what I was trying to say was I needed to find my mate who was actually part of my old YouTube anime abridged series. Like, if you look back on the channel, I used to do like this Attack on Titan abridged series like many years ago, and one of my mates was in the he played one of the roles, and I was going to meet him at Boomtown because he's from down south, like, and I went to go meet him, and people just thought I was going mental, like, oh, he's just talking about this person that doesn't exist. And to their surprise, I ended up bringing him to the camp. I was like, oh yeah, when I recovered from this 2CB flavoured K-hole, I brought him over, and then they were like, oh right, he's not actually as crazy as we thought. So yeah, that was a strange boom. And then later on, this was horrible. We ended up getting more ket off this guy that one of our mates knew, and he introduced us to, and he was like, oh, I can't be doing this ket anymore. So we were like, right, go on, let's walk all the way to the other side of the festival. And if you know about Boomtown, that is a big ass festival. Walked all the way to the other side, went to get some, went back, and went, oh right, yeah, buzzing for this now. And then I did the very stupid mistake of mixing cannabis and ket. I know some people like this combo, but I absolutely hate it. It's like cannabis and alcohol for me. It just disorients me to absolute fuck, makes me well nauseous and like motion sick in a way. So I had a fat line of ket, and then I had a bit on this biff, and I was like, oh wow, I've fucked myself. I've basically signed my own death warrant here. And I just trundled bare outside the tent, and I was like, oh no, I'm fucked. And everyone was like, oh my god, he looks like he's overdosed on like some opioid or something. I looked absolutely dead, and I just curled up in my tent for hours and hours and having to recover. It was disgusting. So that put me off ket for like ages. And then it wasn't until I basically just stopped like enjoying drugs after all the festivals that I went to. But then I started to enjoy it again in 2019, just as like, because I just started doing it in light doses instead of just going the full mile and destroying my mind and body with it, because that was just a terrible idea, and it was possibly my karma that all of this bad experience started to emerge, because I guess I was abusing it in a way. And yeah, so I had some weird experiences in 2019 with the Judge Dredd ego death, but that ended up being a good thing for me in retrospect, so that wasn't too bad. But then it all starts going to shit again earlier this year. So start having some ket again. I was like, oh, all the ket around where I live is like there's some form of drought, and it feels like that the ket is like not as powerful as much anymore. So I assumed it wouldn't affect me. So we were going out. I think we were going to watch like this fight on this sporting event at a pub, and it was for my mate's birthday, and I went to go sort us all some cab. And there's quite a few of us, there's loads of us, but a lot of them were just drinking. And then I went there to this pub with the cat, but I'd already had loads of keys at my car after I'd gone to pick it up. And then I literally, whilst I was walking to the pub, I was losing consciousness more and more and more, and I just happened to somehow retain my my civility by the time I'd met this bouncer with my ID, and he somehow didn't think I was intoxicated whatsoever. Get upstairs and literally sit down, and then I was as soon as I sat down, everything just melted and fucking warped around. It was like I was in almost like a salvia, zipper world. Everything, my mind had no idea of what was actually forming my surroundings. So it was honestly, it was like being in this dream world of different structures and environments all mishmashed together, and I was fucking losing my mind. People watching me apparently said all I did was I kept picking up my beer glass, looking at it, examining it, putting it back down again, staring off into space, doing the exact same thing over and over again. And then when I came to, I looked at my mate whose birthday it was and said, "Oh, has the fight started yet?" And he was like, "Oh mate, it's almost finished." So I was like, holy shit. I'd just been looking at the screen, it was just a mishmash of weird creatures and human torsos with no limbs on them. I was like, oh my god, what is actually going on? And then I was like, oh shit, I never want to experience that ever again. And then a few weeks later, the exact same thing happened at another pub where I was like, oh yeah, I had this line at my mate's hotel room. I was like, oh, it's barely affecting me. I'll go to the toilets when we get to the pub, and I have a big key. And the exact same thing happened, if not worse. I was actually in this pub, and I was just putting my hands in the air, touching these invisible walls. I felt like I was in a box. Everyone's minds were just my mind was melting, and everyone was it felt like everyone was playing with me. In fact, my mate might have been doing that to blag my head. It was everyone knows you're on drugs in here. Everyone's looking at you and all this shit. He's the sort of type to mess with you in a funny way, because it wasn't real. At the end of the day, there was nothing bad that was going to happen to me. Even though I had these feelings of, I need to get out of this pub right now to see if there's anything outside in the actual universe, because I thought this pub was just literally the universe, and it was all folding in on itself. So then I had to recuperate, and I just got up and walked to the toilet, but I was walking on a right angle, so I looked absolutely ridiculous. I think some of the staff thought they must have just thought I was absolutely leathered or something, because no one thinks someone's gonna come into the pub and be on the verge of a K-hole. But honestly, that was horrible. And then I reckon the very worst time. This is the worst time by far for me on Ket. So I had this habit of getting really ketty and then putting my earphones on and then putting binaural beats on and just sort of floating in my bed, and it'd be a really beautiful, almost spiritual experience of flying through these corridors and halls that are all made out of weird geometric patterns, and it was very relaxing in a sense. But then I took it too far to the point of I was literally so detached from reality. I mean, you don't even have any sense of having a body when this happens, and you close your eyes, you're literally flying around. So I basically woke up and I was I opened my eyes and I was K-holing, so I must have freaked out. I didn't remember any of this at all, but every time I'd open my eyes, something different would be happening. I was oh my god, I'd touch my phone, and my phone would be all jumbled up, all the visuals, and I'd touch part of the bed, and the bed would reappear and shit. And then before I know it, I wake up and I'm in my parents' bedroom. I'm just sat there and I'm oh my god, what the fuck is going on? And it turns out I'd been screaming my head off, whoa, help me, okay, or some shit. And then they'd heard me and gone in at very early hours of the morning and found me there just absolutely spangled. And then obviously they were looking up, oh my god, what is he on, what is wrong with him, do we need to call an ambulance? And then I just sort of came to oh whoa, what the fuck's happened? And I literally don't remember anything from taking it to that point, really. Only brief snippets of waking up in bed, opening my eyes, touching the bed and my phone, and they'd sort of reform for a bit as my consciousness sort of came back into being. And yeah, they found me there, and that was very embarrassing. But thankfully, I explained to them what was going on, and they were semi-understanding of it. They weren't they weren't hostile with me at all, because I think they know, like, obviously the best way to deal with someone when they're really fucked up is not to frighten them or put them in a worrisome state. So that ended up resolving itself quite easily, but it was obviously so weird that actually happened, and it's put me off doing that sort of like spiritual adventure on Ket with my earphones on anymore, because I just don't want that to happen, because I can't trust myself to not scream or shriek in these weird demonic voices. So yeah, that was possibly the worst time. There's probably even worse times that I can't even think of right now, but if they come at I've had some bad ones on MXC as well. I might make a video on that. If you'd like to see more of my, or hear more of my pretty depraved experiences on psychoactive chemicals, then please let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to share them with you in the future, because there's far too many priceless moments that I've unfortunately ended up in that I know people want to hear, because they are absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Hope you're all doing well.